All right, thank you for joining us for this Analytics Insider webinar. We're really excited to be walking you through some of the basics, some advanced techniques, and some of the configuration options that you have for managing an ever-changing number of marketing channels within the Adobe Analytics Cloud. My name is Eric Matisoff, and at Adobe, I'm the Analytics and Data Science Evangelist. And joining me today, I have Ben Thompson, who is the Director of E-commerce Analytics over at Bluestem Brands, who's going to be walking you through some real-world examples of taking the best advantage of marketing channels within his company. So without further ado, let's actually jump in. To kick things off, a quick reminder, if you have questions on the latest and greatest of Adobe Analytics features and capabilities and tips and tricks, head on over to the Adobe Analytics YouTube channel, which you can access easily by going to adobe.ly/Adobe Analytics YouTube. Keep in mind that's all lowercase. In addition, we also have the Adobe Experience League, which you can access through adobe.ly/Experience League in a capital E, capital L there. It's a great way to stay in touch with the community at large when it comes to the Adobe Experience Cloud. And go ahead and click on that intelligent guidance link in order to receive tailored tutorials and feedback and recommendations associated with your needs within Adobe Experience Cloud products. You can also head on over into the Analytics Forum by going to adobe.ly/Analytics Forum, all lowercase, or just clicking the question mark and clicking into the community. It's a great way to talk with all of your peers within the analytics community, as well as interact with folks from the product teams here at Adobe. And finally, we have just a couple more stops left on our Adobe Insider Tour as well. Upcoming soon are Denver and Toronto, so be sure to sign up and register for those. They're just a couple of weeks away, so you can do that by going to adobe.ly/insider tour, capital I, capital T, and while you're there, you'll get the opportunity to learn some tips and tricks, get a feel for the future of Adobe Analytics in our annual Sneaks competition or Sneaks session, as well as be a part of our Analytics Rockstar event. Then finally, if you're looking to stay on top of the latest and greatest when it comes to Adobe Analytics, there's no better way than leveraging the Adobe Analytics Insider newsletter. You can access it by receiving monthly information from Adobe by going to adobe.ly/Analytics Insider, capital A, capital I. All right, so from there, let's actually talk about what we're all here for, which is to talk about marketing channels. And so throughout the day or over the next hour, we're going to be walking through each of these different topics. Preparing for marketing channels, an overview, of course, of those marketing channels, then preparing for them, configuring them, and some tips and tricks. And then I'll be handing it over to Ben Thompson from Bluestem Brands, who will be walking you through a bunch of different tips from the real world, showing you exactly what he's been doing at Bluestem to make the most of the marketing channel's capabilities, and even provide you with some analyses of how he's been able to leverage them within his organization. So let's talk through an overview real quickly. First of all, you have a lot of options when it comes to Adobe Analytics, and that will not be a surprise to anyone. And when it comes to external traffic dimensions, you've actually got three different types of external traffic sources. You've got three different columns across the top. You have traffic sources, which populates via the paid search detection rule. Then the next column, you have campaign reporting coming in through s.campaign. And then finally, you have marketing channels, which is the topic of today's session. There's a lot of content on this table, so this may actually be one of those times that you take a screenshot of our webinar or even hit pause on the YouTube channel or something like that in order to really dive deep into the difference between them. But there's a couple of things to point out here. Basically, the recommendation is to take advantage of all three of these, but in terms of setup, but leverage marketing channels specifically for your analyses. And we'll get into the reasons why, but the short answer is that traffic sources is useful for setting up paid search detection. Campaign reporting is useful for setting up other paid campaigns, and marketing channels combines all of that along with your organic and natural channels as well into one uber powerful marketing channel set of dimensions. So what are these marketing channel dimensions? Marketing channel dimensions, as I mentioned, combine both paid and organic traffic for all of your incoming traffic to the site. Your channel rule criteria is customizable, and it can take into consideration any of those items we were just discussing around tracking codes and search engine detection, as well as referring domains, entry pages, and query parameters. Then processing rules are applied to all incoming traffic in sort of a waterfall order. And so you can see that in that screenshot there on the left of the order for how natural search is defined. Then if it doesn't meet those rules, it follows through to email and finally affiliate. And all of that then turns into your beautiful marketing channel workspace dimension. A few of those reporting features that are built into marketing channels include dimensions that default to last touch or closers when it comes to attribution, but can be expanded using Attribution IQ to help adjust attribution on the fly for your marketing channel dimensions as well. Each channel can be broken down by details that are specific and unique to that channel, or even bubbled up a level using classifications in order to apply additional metadata, like you see in the screenshot on the right, where we've bubbled the two different types of marketing channels between paid, earned, and then if we had a longer screenshot, you'd also see owned as well. There's two very simple steps to setting up marketing channels. First, you create your channels, then you define your rules. And don't worry, a little later, we'll be walking you through Ben's exact examples for how they set them up over at Bluestem Brands. So once you create and name your channels, you'll go through a wizard. And that wizard starts with what we call an auto setup. If you've never created or set up marketing channels for your report suite before, that is the first screen you'll see within the admin console when you head into the marketing channel manager. Beware that once you've then customized the names of your channels, you actually cannot delete them once they've been created, so only create names that will be used going forward. However, they can be renamed. Finally, you'll want to make sure that all the rules that apply do have that checkbox on the left under Enabled in order to make sure that they appear within your reporting dimensions. There's one other item to call out here in that there are some override options. So each of these channels, you can manually select whether or not it should override the previous channel. By default, you're going to see channels like direct and session refresh or internal that most likely don't have the override checked. And we'll actually give you an example of that right now. So here's an example of 4 different visitors that have 3 different visits each. So that in this first world where direct override is unchecked, which is recommended, that first visitor that you see there with the red hair, when she visits on the 3rd visit and perhaps creates some revenue there, that revenue, instead of being attributed back to direct or that click-through, would be attributed back to email, since email is set to override direct, because the override is not checked. Similarly, in the second row, you can see that from paid search on the first visit, then direct and direct on the next 2, again, that paid search value is going to override the values collected within direct, because that's the most recently used marketing channel that does have the override checkbox checked. And etc. With the third one, if all 3 are direct, then direct will get the attribution there. And then if the bottom one, if none of them are direct, then it will simply be the most recently set value will be used within last touch channel, or can be adjusted, of course, using Attribution IQ. Now take a look at how those 3 items in purple actually change when I switch from direct override unchecked to direct override checked. See how all 3 of them now have a click-through associated with each of those different direct visits, which means that has overridden the previously driven marketing channel. It's a really important concept, and we want to give you the flexibility to make the decision on your own who should be getting that attribution when it comes to setting the values of marketing channels. The next step after you've defined your channels and naming them is actually defining the processing rules. So the processing rules that you can see listed out here are pretty standard items. Maybe we added a custom one or two of them in there, but Ben is actually going to walk you through their exact detail for how they've defined processing rules within Bluestem. But the idea is that if a visit comes through on search, first a user's referring domain and paid search detection will try to identify whether or not that visit should be attributed to paid search. If it doesn't meet that criteria, then it'll go to the next processing rule. However, if it does meet that criteria, it will stay with paid search. That's terribly important to understand is how this ordering of processing rules works, because if those were flipped, natural search then paid search, you may actually accidentally receive or attribute traffic to natural search by accident. The last piece around marketing channels to go through are around marketing channel classifications. So this is possibly one of those items that you may not be aware of, is you have the ability through your admin console to actually apply classifications to all three of the different types of marketing channel dimensions. That's marketing channel, first touch marketing channel, last touch marketing channel, as well as all three of those for channel detail. So that means marketing channel detail, first touch marketing channel detail, and last touch marketing channel detail. Now, any of those can be used, and when you apply a single classification to one, then that actually flows to all three of them. So you only have to perform that once. Keep in mind, you can upload classifications through the standard classification importer or through using the classification rule builder as well. Both of those may be useful for you. So wait. This is a animated GIF from one of my favorite movies of all time, The Princess Bride, and a question comes in, just wait. Why, and the question that we'll get is, what happens to first touch channel and last touch channel dimensions in Workspace in this new world where Attribution IQ can effectively change the attribution of any dimension on the fly? Well, let me explain. The answer is you actually have a lot of flexibility. We've created a brand new dimension that you may or may not be aware of, simply called marketing channel. The goal of that is simply to help avoid confusion. Any attribution model that is applied to the previous dimensions ignores the settings that are applied to those dimensions. So if I were to effectively apply a linear attribution to a metric, even though I'm looking at the first touch channel dimension, then linear overrides the first touch channel concept. Similarly, I could even apply a last touch attribution model to the first touch channel. My head will actually not explode. Instead, we'll see the last touch attribution model in that instance. So that confusion is why we've created this new concept of a marketing channel dimension, so that it's just simply no attribution is applied. If you're curious how it works, that second paragraph or second set of sentences will be useful for you. Marketing channel actually duplicates the values in last touch channel, and classifications are applied to all three. All right. So what do you need to think about when it comes to preparing for marketing channels? First of all, you need to think through some tracking code best practices. And there is, again, a lot of useful information on this slide, but it's not worth going through every single item. This may be a useful one, again, to take a screenshot of, or leverage the recording to hit pause. Now we have some recommendations for when it comes to assigning prefixes to your tracking code campaign ID. So that may be useful there on the right. But a good tracking code, generally, they're going to be shorter, they're going to be granular, and they're going to be potentially cryptic in order to keep your customers comfortable and your competitors at bay. They should also be unique, lowercase, and consistent. I can't stress consistency enough. So be sure to work with your agencies, work with your advertising teams to ensure that your best practices are being followed. And Ben even has some good tips later that he'll walk you through associated with these as well. Also, we highly recommend leveraging ad analytics for paid search to expand the high quality data that you're able to capture within Adobe Analytics. This is where data from each of the paid search engines, Google, Bing, and Yahoo, is automatically importing data when it comes to the dimensions as well as the metrics associated with your paid search data. Plus, we've even built a search engine focused template to make it easy to analyze. That additional integration comes to you at no additional cost for any of the current analytics SKUs, Select, Prime, or Ultimate. So how about the importance of tracking codes in marketing channels? Keep in mind that we were talking earlier about that really consistent set of tracking codes, and this shows exactly why it's valuable. If those tracking codes are not useful, then that could potentially throw off all of the data within the marketing channel dimensions. Whereas in this example, you can see that that prefix of DA means it's a display ad with a unique identifier after it that helps me know two things. First of all, how to properly define the marketing channel. And then second of all, that I can include that and define that within my marketing channel detail within my marketing channel processing rules. Next up, be sure to still set up paid search detection within your report suite. Here in bold, we've identified where this actually exists, and it works very simply. The first thing that paid search detection does is it looks to see, is this visit coming from a recognized search engine? And that list of search engines we keep updated all the time. Then, when traffic comes to the site, paid search detection looks for a query string parameter that you've customized here within the paid search detection settings within the admin console. If it exists, then the visit will be bucketed as paid search. If that query string parameter, QSP, does not exist, then instead we're labeling that traffic as natural search. Beware that almost definitely the keywords will not be collected automatically by paid search detection. As you may be aware, natural search keywords were removed from referrers for all analytics platforms and almost all search engines, so rarely do we ever see a natural search keyword come in. And then most likely, that same keyword was removed from the referrer for paid search now even as well. So again, you'll have to think about how in the landing page URL or as a query parameter or as part of ad analytics for paid search, you can actually automatically capture that data within a dimension or a variable within Adobe Analytics. The next step you want to do is configure your internal URL filters. Beware that the goal of doing this is to ensure that your own domains and subdomains are filtered out when Adobe Analytics is understanding what a referrer is. They are different from the URL filters in the S-code or app measurement library because that simply says that differentiates between an exit link versus a non-exit link. So beware of using these properly, and you can check them to confirm that they're set up correctly by heading into your admin console for your report suite. One of the last pieces to define is your engagement window. Your engagement window is by default set to 30 days, but you can reset that to any other look back window or engagement window that you like. And so keep in mind that you'll want to do that. And when you do update that, you'll most likely want to hit an expire all so that you can completely reset the data associated with it. Again, think about your business. If you're selling socks or t-shirts, then maybe a smaller engagement period makes sense. If you're selling cars or big ticket items, then perhaps a longer engagement period makes more sense. In fact, here's even some details around how to determine the right engagement window. You could consider using the visit level segment focused on return frequency to get a better feel for how that expiration could be set. All right, so coming up next, we have some details on configuring your marketing channels. So as I mentioned earlier, by default, the first time you click to enable marketing channels in your report suite, you'll have this auto setup wizard. This can be a useful way to pre-populate a bunch of individual marketing channel processing rules that are automatically ordered for you just based on the email identifier, the display query string parameter, or any affiliate domains as well. This is a really useful way to kind of kickstart your marketing channel setup. Then you'll want to consider creating a custom channel as well, and Ben has some great ideas for some other custom channels you could create. For example, a couple of them that we've seen are associated with internal and direct and referring domains. So this concept of internal or session refresh is perhaps a little bit of a confusing one. And by default, that's going to be listed as internal, but we actually think it makes more sense to rename it session refresh in order to prevent any confusion. So generally, in terms of order, we like to keep these almost all the way at the bottom in terms of your priority within your marketing channel processing rules. So that concept of a session refresh, what actually is it? It consists of visits to the site where the referring URL matches the internal URL filters that we were talking about just a minute ago. And what that means is the visitor came from somewhere within the site in order to start a brand new visit. Both direct and session refresh only get last touch credit if they were also the first touch channel. So the thinking there is that you should not choose an override associated with session refresh, direct, or internal, however you have them defined. So here's some scenarios where session refresh may occur. I'm not going to go through all 6 of them in detail, but probably the most common one is associated with session timeout. When the engagement period expires and they open a tab to visit the website again, the referring URL is going to show as an internal domain and therefore should be classified as session refresh. Another scenario is if not all site pages are properly tagged, or if there's a redirect where the referrer is getting lost, perhaps some cross-domain traffic where a user is heading from one report suite to another or one domain to another. Finally, some long entry page load times, or if a user for some reason decides to clear their cookies mid-site, the referrer remains but the cookie does not, and therefore the visit will look new. So that final channel order, here's again that list of processing orders that we saw earlier, and Ben will walk us through exactly how he has set his up so that you have a good feel for each of those as well. So let's talk through a few different tips, and this is where we're going to get a little bit more advanced in how you can take advantage of marketing channels within your organization. First of all, let the attribution panel do the heavy lifting. When you're comparing and contrasting models and marketing channels, it can be really useful to have these pre-built visualizations. And Ben will walk us through exactly what the results of one of his recent analyses using this panel actually looks like. So what you can do is actually compare attribution models on the fly by right-clicking on almost any metric within Analysis Workspace and applying a different attribution model. Then automatically we're going to create a third column that shows exactly the difference between the attribution model that is the default and the new one that you've set as your comparison. Another useful tip is to consider just using a custom model in order to show assist focused orders. So this is where you can apply 0% to the starter, 100% to the players, and 0% to the closer. And this custom model shows you all of the marketing channels that didn't create awareness or actually close the conversion, but instead were key to helping the purchase along the way. Next up, you can consider still leveraging those last touch channel and first touch channel dimensions in order to create this cross tab view of your metrics. And so here across the left, we have last touch, and across the top, we have first touch dragged in as a dimension. And then we're quickly able to see how first touch and last touch are working together where they are exactly the same. Generally, this means that they were either the only visit that drove that conversion, or it was both the originating and the closing attribution marketing channel as well. Then you have the opportunity to analyze, for example, all of the different last touch channels that were supported based on any specific first touch channel, as you can see here. So I can see that the top different channels that were helping to drive email driven first touches were actually aligned with referring domains, display, and social networks. So that can be really valuable in seeing the difference between how those two different attribution models work together. Now, this is one location where the new marketing channel dimension actually won't help you. So consider leveraging last touch across the left and first touch across the top. So with that, I'd like to hand things on over to Ben, who's going to talk us through some marketing channels in the real world and how Ben is using them over at Bluestem Brands. So Ben, why don't you take it away?
Thanks, Eric. Hi, everybody. This is Ben Thompson. I'm the Director of E-Commerce Analytics over at Bluestem Brands. With our agenda today, we're going to talk a little bit about who I am and who Bluestem is. We're going to walk through defining and setting up some channels and the processing rules that go into those. Then we'll take a look at some reporting on some channels and how channels interact with tracking codes, and that can help you QA your channel setups. And finally, we'll play a little bit in Workspace in the new attribution panel that'll help us see some of those models that Eric was talking about. So who am I? I'm Ben Thompson. As I mentioned previously, I work for Bluestem Brands. We're a multi-channel retailer based out of Eden Prairie, Minnesota. It's about 20 minutes outside of Minneapolis. We've got 13 different retail brands. You can see the logos of some of them off to the right there. We do about $2 billion in revenue, the vast majority of that online. Historically, we're a kind of a catalog and direct marketing company, but now with the move to web by basically everybody, we're very web-centric and actually do quite a bit of mobile sales, which is interesting. We play in a unique spot with a credit and retail mix where a lot of our sales are done on our proprietary credit products. So let's talk a little bit more about channels. So first off, you'll want to prep a little bit internally to define your channels. There's some key decisions that are going to go into that. One thing I've found here at Bluestem is we really need to define what is our channel and what's some detail or a sub-channel about that channel. For example, we've had some internal discussions around are branded and non-branded search channels, or are they just a detail or a sub-channel of paid search? It's really important to discuss these with your marketing team on how they're pulling levers and aligning their spend for these channels, and if your reporting is going to match up for their needs. Next, you have the correct identifiers in place for your channels and those details. Usually these are a URL parameter. We use one called CTID internally. Often it's CID, or some other companies have kind of their own code that goes there. But this is how Adobe's going to grab that detail for you, and it's really important that your URL parameters are A, present, but B, consistent. Third, we really want to check for some gotchas. I'll walk you through a little bit more detail on some of these, but some that can come up are if your site uses redirects, you may lose some tracking. Google Display Network, because it runs through Google, can be detected as a paid search referral. Your paid versus organic social, you may have tagged some of your paid social, but how are we viewing that organic? And finally, there's some tricky things with email as well. Finally, on this slide, we really want to document what the channels, the details, and the parameters are. This isn't the most exciting part of our jobs or of Adobe Analytics, but it's really, really important. So on the next slide, you'll see a sample of my SDR. This can be really, really handy, especially for users who aren't admins, and they can't go in and check how you've set things up, as Eric showed. They need a document that they can go reference. So this is ours. We show what the source is, what our CTID is, and if there's a sub-campaign, we put that into a CT campaign parameter, and then we check off whether or not we've got an override on those channels. Finally, as we look at collecting those marketing channel detail or values, we mark that down on here so people know which piece of information from our URL we're collecting. So let's dive a little bit into my setup. So here's a screenshot of our marketing channel manager. This is where we set up our channels initially, and you can enable and disable channels here as well as choose the overrides as Eric showed. He touched on using the wizard, but what if you already have a setup that you want to make some changes to? Here's the same place we can do that. So I'll touch first a little bit just on override as Eric did. An override set to true is going to overwrite that previous channel as last touch. Set to no will not. So for instance, if I have a direct set to override and I visit via paid search, then direct and convert, direct is going to get credit. If that override is set to no, then paid search is going to get credit. Most often, direct, internal, and other referrers are set to not override. Some companies choose to override using any paid media and not paid media to not. This one's really up to you. As a best practice, direct, internal, and other should be set to not, but where you go from there is sort of up to your company. Next, let's take a look at the fun stuff, the processing rules. These help Adobe identify which channel a visit came from. These rules will happen in a waterfall style, and you set the processing order however you like. One of the things to remember here is that these are not a priority, but these are how you bucket your marketing channels. It can be a little tricky because when most of the time a channel is clearly identified via your URL parameter or our CTID. Sometimes a visit could look like it came from more than one, so the order becomes really important here. For example, if you have a redirect that carries through URL parameters, it could look like an internal referral or some other paid channel. So we put internal really low on our order in the waterfall here. Also, as mentioned before, in paid search, there's an option for Adobe to detect using their rules if a visit was from, say, Google. It's great, but Google Display Network also comes from Google and might look like it was a paid search. So what we do is we put display at the very top because we're heavy users of GDN. It's also really good to create that other campaigns bucket to catch any missed channels toward the bottom. We'll touch more on that in a minute. Let's look at some of the detail behind some of our processing rules. So for this one, we've set up for display. On our SDR, we said display could be from a couple of CTIDs, 471 or 1364. So we've set the rules to look at any of the following criteria to be true. You also have the option of all if you need them all to match. So if our query string parameter is 471 or 1364, we're going to set that channel to display. Then we get to choose our channel detail. This is a secondary piece of data we can store about the visit, which will still follow the attribution rules and overrides that we set on the previous screen. In this case, because display is two CIDs, we actually are storing the CTID value in our channel value or detail. As a side note, we could have just called these two different channels, but for internal reporting purposes, we wanted them lumped together. Setting that value or detail lets us break them back apart for reporting purposes. If you're not sure what to put as your channel's value, a good rule of thumb is just to use its identifier or URL parameter. That can help you troubleshoot and do data quality checks on what is ending up in your channel, and you can always change it later. Our next rule is paid search. We mentioned earlier about the paid and natural search detection rules, and this is where they come into play. They can be really handy to help catch those paid search visits, even when you may have changed or altered an old parameter. If they're still in your paid search detection rules, you can still catch those. When the URL has one of our tracking IDs, then we're going to set that channel to paid search, also if it has those detection rules met. And we're going to set the channel value here to our CT campaign, which helps us know which paid search campaign it is, such as branded, non-branded, or PLAs. This detail becomes really useful later as we break out reporting, and I'll show you that. Next, we're going to look at some of our other referrers. So we'll check out social network and kind of our other bucket of referring domains. So far, we've looked mainly at the URL parameters for our rules, but there's a lot of other options. So for instance, on social, we use the referring domain to check social networks, as they might come from Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc., but might not have our URL parameters if somebody posted a link to our site via organic. We also have our URL parameters identified in this rule as well. Finally, we have a rule looking just for all other referring domains lower in the waterfall, just to check if some other website has linked to ours without our tracking IDs on them. We like to capture that and see where they came from. Next, I highly recommend that you create an other campaigns bucket. This one should just have a rule that if your query parameter is present, then we're going to grab it and put it in other campaigns. And I definitely recommend setting the detail value to that URL parameter. This helps a ton in troubleshooting. If you see that this bucket is growing, or you think there are visits and orders missing from another bucket, digging into the detail through your other campaigns bucket can help you a ton. I would also definitely recommend setting alerts around here to notify you if that bucket is growing unexpectedly. Finally, a little lower in the waterfall, we're going to want rules that capture direct traffic and internal traffic. So for direct, it's simply if a refer does not exist and it's the first page of the visit. And in our case, we set the value or detail for this to the page. Next is internal. You might have other subdomains that you track or have some redirects that move traffic around from their original landing page, or have some of those cases that Eric laid out before where an internal or a refresh rule become really handy. So in our case, we've got a lot of redirects, and we want to make sure that we're capturing those correctly, as the Adobe Analytics tag might not have time to fire on the very first page. One word of caution on these: if you do have redirects, sometimes they drop URL parameters. You'll want to work with your engineering team to make sure that those keep the URL parameters, because a redirect from, say, a paid search might look like it's an internal referral just because it dropped the paid search URL parameter. They often happen so fast that the Adobe tags can't capture them. So now just a few other notes on setup. First of all, it's really important to remember that changing these rules doesn't reset history. The rules you put in place will only start to process new data from the point at which you hit save. If you do make some changes, make note of what and when, and put that in your SDR so people know why data changed. We had an instance a few months ago where we saw one of our channels leap in the year-over-year view, and that was because a year ago we had made some changes that nobody documented, and we didn't know why that all of a sudden changed. You can also add classification hierarchies to channels, just like you can to EVARs. You can also change the expiration setting. So if you'd like to end the engagement period at 30 days of inactivity or maybe 7, you can do that. And your own business model might kind of fit in here. Finally, if you want to bundle up some channels together for certain types of reporting, you can quickly create some rule builder reporting rollups. For example, we often view our internal and direct as part of one bucket because we know we have some redirects on that homepage. So, now that you've created your channels and collected the details about them, you can start using the data. A really great place to start is in Workspace and just searching for channel. In my Workspace, I've got a lot of segments created off of these channels, some classifications, and some roll-ups, as I mentioned. Your data now really becomes flexible to use however you like. Next, let's bring in some metrics to start analyzing the marketing channels and look at trends over time. Remember, your marketing channels don't equal your tracking codes, but can be really useful for QA when used together. So we can start to build out some reporting channel by channel based on the rules and overrides we've set up. But you might be thinking, yeah, I've already done that with tracking codes. So let's talk about some of the advantages we've got here. For instance, tracking codes only give a single allocation, where marketing channels can give us first and last touch. Marketing channels also extends beyond tracking codes with channels like internal, direct, and organic search, where you might not already be setting tracking codes. And you get the advantage of choosing overrides in marketing channels, which you can't do in tracking codes. So for all of these reasons, when you compare your tracking codes and campaigns to marketing channels, you're likely to see some differences. But for QA, looking for general alignment in these points towards a good setup. And if you crosshatch your IDs in the detail and the values that we collected on our processing rules setup, you can make sure those all match up and make sure you're collecting the right IDs in the right channels. I'd recommend highly on landing on a source of truth within your organization that everybody can agree upon using. For my own organization, we use marketing channels, and for many of the reasons that Eric and I have laid out here, I feel that's right. But because of the flexibility, I think it's overall the best. But for your organization, that might be different. So let's look a little bit more at reporting. I can also use my channel detail variables that I saved in my setup to look at the detail I've collected. If you remember, I wanted to lump my branded, non-branded, and PLAs into a paid search bucket. But I still want to be able to break those three out. That's where looking at that last touch channel detail comes in. I can now perform all of these breakouts in Workspace, Report Builder, etc. This is also another great way to start checking that your channels are working properly. If you're breaking down the channels by your detail, and some of the things you're seeing in there don't make sense, or you see data that should be in other channels, you might have a setup problem. Again, this is where that other bucket comes into play. When we break down the other bucket channel by a detail, we can see the other IDs that might have been missed. On the next slide, I'll show you some of mine. Here you can see in the third row of my last touch channel detail under bucket, I've got a campaign or a query parameter that got messed up and lumped together. So because this got malformed in the URL, all of these were falling into my other bucket, where these were actually SMS text messages we sent up and should have been in another bucket. So this is a really great way to catch some of those gotchas and make sure you've got everything flowing into the right channel. Again, it's a really good idea to create an alert to proactively inform you of any increases in this other bucket. So now that you've got some beautiful channel data, what else can we do with it? Well, right here is an example of a report that I created in Excel using Report Builder, breaking out some of our programs and looking at year-over-year changes for our visits for some of my stakeholders. For people who might not have access or really understand Adobe Analytics, this can be super powerful for them to still get that same view of the data that you've got. Now, a quick wrap-up before we go play with some of this data in Workspace. So, clearly define your channels and how you identify them. Do the work up front and document this stuff in your SDR. You'll save yourself a lot of headaches later. Get those channels and processing rules set up. Really watch for some of those gotchas, like Google Display, the order of the buckets, URL parameters getting messed up or dropping on redirects, and make sure that that other bucket is there to save you. And then do a data quality check and document any changes that you might make along the way. Finally, start some great reporting and data exploration. Break down those channels, roll them back up, try some attribution models like we'll do next, and use what you already know about your media to find the best model fit. So next, let's hop over into Workspace. So now that we're in Workspace, what we can do is we can go explore the new attribution channel or panel. This panel, and I'll just drag it in here, lets us compare attribution models for any dimension or metric we'd like. Right now, we're just going to use the marketing channel because that's what we're talking about, but you can actually use any EVAR in here. So let's go ahead and select the channel. I'm going to grab my marketing channel and drag it in as my channel here. And for my success metric, I'm going to use orders. Then we get to pick which models we'd like to include. I can just hover over this and do a drop down to see they've automatically included last touch, first touch, and linear. There are many other attribution models included, so same touch, some J-curve, or even a custom one. I'm going to just leave it what's pre-selected. Next, we have to pick a look-back window. So this matters when a user may have more than one conversion. For the visit look-back window, each visit has its conversion distributed according to the model independently on that visit. For visitors, all the conversions are distributed according to the model against that visitor over time. So as a rule of thumb, I like to say for a low-frequency business, a visit is best. For high frequency, and people are buying from you quite often, a visitor might be best to spread those orders over many channels. I'm going to look at the last 30 days, and that can, of course, be changed as well. And let's go ahead and build and see what it looks like. There we go. Now we get this great visual of all of our channels and how revenue looks depending on the model. I'm going to go ahead and drill into our affiliates. So if I click on affiliate here, you can see my affiliate program gets a lot of last touch credit in green, but not a ton of first touch, and a little lower on linear as well. This is probably because some people might be ready to purchase, but search affiliates for some sort of promotion right before they purchase, so then that last touch is an affiliate. Let's look at paid search. Paid search, on the other hand, is often high on the first touch, so they might be starting that shopping journey with us. And it's a little earlier than expected, actually. So when we're doing some paid search bidding or keyword tuning, we might want to zoom in a little bit on people who were early in the funnel and capture them. So this is one of those things that our marketing team learned by doing these exercises. Let's go ahead and scroll down and look at channel overlap as well. I'm going to go ahead and look at direct and paid search and email. And then it's going to create a great Venn diagram here of those three programs. There we go. This can help me understand the incrementality. So we can see in here that there's not a ton of overlap. What you might see in some programs is a lot of overlap, and you might want to change some of your spend or the way that you're addressing some of these media pieces. Let's go ahead and unselect those three. And you can see a great histogram here as well. The scatter plot is going to give us all of my channels by attribution method, and we can see how far the direct is up here in internal as well. So it's far and away the biggest regardless of my method. I also get a trended report, and because of my short period of time, this doesn't look too exciting by model. I also get a great flow report to see my channels over time, model by model. So I can see the cross-channel jumps that people are making across my channels. So you might be wondering, after looking at all of this, which model should I use? Well, that one's really up to you and your organization. One way that we've looked at models is to look at which ones we already know about and the incrementality thereof through testing that we've done, and to determine which model is going to fit that the best. So, for instance, we've done a lot of holdout testing to help to determine how effective our paid search is, right? When we know the incrementality of that from our holdout testing, and we find a model that fits those beliefs really well, we don't have to keep holding out, and we can just follow the model. So we get a lot of value by acting off of the modeling and the data that we get through these workspaces. So that does it for the workspace.
Great. Thank you, Ben. One question I have for you is whether you're using the same model for marketing channel all the time, or are you aligning a different attribution model per marketing channel, or how are you handling that? Is it based on metric or dimension? What's the best practice that you've defined when it comes to attribution and marketing channels?
That's a great question. So one of the things that we found is during the holiday season, when a lot of our sales are occurring, some of the marketing channels modeling that we may have done during the rest of the year sort of goes out the window. So we see a lot more paid search actually closing those orders than it does opening them. So from time to time throughout the year, we'll look at different models. Also, we use a lot of the Attribution IQ technology on some of our other EVARs, such as where we capture our search terms. So across the site, we can see what people are searching for in their shopping journey and what sort of terms might be opening or closing those orders.
Oh, that's great. So you're using a different model depending on the channel, depending on the dimension, and depending on the time of year. That's really great. Good thinking.
Exactly.
Awesome. All right. Well, with that, that's everything that we had to show when it comes to marketing channels. Thank you so much for joining us for this Analytics Insider webinar. Don't forget to hit those polls. Thanks, everyone.